tell you you're the greatest, but once they terminate us, burnt goes the misery. Everybody wants to be a cat, 'cause a cat's the only cat who knows where it's at. Tell him everybody's picking along the feline beat. A square in the hole makes you wish you were born, but a square in the act makes the music go back to the caveman days. So everybody wants to be a cat. Look out for yourself. There might be a dog. I'm doing this review whilst ironing my clothes. Ever heard of Arcane? It might drive people insane in the main brain as people watch the show again. What is Arcane? I'm going to be honest with you. The closest thing I came to playing League of Legends was playing Dota 2. I haven't played League of Legends at all, but it's a popular, massively multiplayer online strategy game apparently. Of course, no story can ever be perfect, especially when you're talking about the category of video game adaptations in movie and television form, which have had quite a questionable reputation. As far as movies are concerned, most of them tend to suck, either because they were created by people who just simply don't understand the source material, or they didn't take enough creative liberties with the said source material that they had. Sure, they can be good for a laugh if you're at a drunk party, but in terms of something we'd consider high art, video game adaptations have failed to match that category. However, over the recent years, video game adaptations to movie and especially television series has surprisingly gotten better. People have especially praised video game adaptations that were put up on Netflix. Castlevania being amongst them, even though that's had its fair share of critiques. The Witcher's gained quite some reputation, even though that too has had its fair share of critiques just in regards to how it's structured as a show. Arcane, based on League of Legends, this steampunk fantasy show. It's a steampunk fantasy show about a corrupt society with people in the higher-ups and people in the poor slums, as it were. This is made by the same people who made League of Legends in collaboration with a French animation studio. So, as you can tell, I pretty much knew almost little to nothing about League of Legends, and the only thing I heard about Arcane was that it's a good show, praising the series for how innovative and emotionally gripping the series was. I've even heard someone say that this series provides woke writing done right. So clearly, this was a good story simply because the writers focused on making a good story above any other agenda people would often criticize Hollywood for nowadays. Because let me tell you, representing minorities in films and television is not necessarily an easy thing to do. This is quite an impressive feat because representing minorities can be quite tricky. This achievement from the show is especially impressive when you consider the fact that representing minorities is a bit of a delicate art these days. This is especially impressive on the writer's part because representing minorities can be quite a delicate art to properly capture. If you lean too heavily on neglection, that's abuse, but if you lean too heavily on praising them, it turns into propaganda. Alright, enough of the hype. What is the story about? Okay, as said before, now, let me just break this down. There's a lot that happens in this story, but I'm a casual viewer, so I'm just going to describe the story so that the layman can understand. The story of Arcane is set in the fictional steampunk city of Piltover, which consists of two categories: the rich higher-ups and the poor people living in the slums. It's a very disjointed and conflicting society. It's a society where people have grudges against each other, politicians are willing to manipulate and backstab each other for power, gangs are formed, goodness isn't always rewarded, and evil isn't always punished. The show does a good job of setting up this disjointed society right from the get-go. In the lower slum part of society, the show focuses on the bond between two sisters and their young gang. In the higher-ups, the show focuses on two young scientists on the verge of a scientific breakthrough akin to magic. The young gang of the slums are trying to look out for each other and survive in all the ways they can, all whilst dealing with other bitter rivalries. Especially with grudges that their father figure had formed in the past. Lurking within the world of the slums, and keeping his eye on the world of the higher-ups, is a sinister figure who's come up with a new concoction of corrupt energy of his own. This man's name is Silco, and you know he's a sinister figure because he looks like Blofeld and he has a British accent. As Silco creates this energy that can corrupt and turn people into gargantuan, hulking monsters, Silco sets out to deal with his grudge against the young gang's father figure. Amongst the young gang, including two sisters, the older one being Vi and the younger one being Powder, they all look out for one another, but they all constantly tell off young Powder for making mistakes. Yet poor young eager Powder wants to help. At the same time though, Powder is quite curious about these small powerful blue gemstones that she and her gang had stolen from the scientists in the higher-ups. Even just breaking one of these small gemstones is enough to make a big explosion. So, when Vi and her gang get caught up in a conflict against Silco's gang in trying to save their father figure, when Vi and her gang try to save their father figure from Silco and his gang in a big conflict, Powder tries to help by sneaking by and using her little toy to blow up one of the blue gemstones to help her friends and family. But oh man, would the Joker from Batman adore this series, because all it takes is one bad day to reduce the sanest person alive to lunacy. Whilst Powder successfully manages to delay Silco and his henchmen, she unintentionally kills all her friends and family except for Vi. Vi is enraged and leaves her with only Silco of all people to comfort Powder. All after Vi called Powder a jinx. Oh boy. Only 3 episodes in and the stakes already get extremely high emotionally? Needless to say, my friend Brooks Gallinghouse, aka Squid Bear, motivating me, and our other friend Charlie, to binge watch this Netflix show was worth it. Because things start getting, oh, so crazier from episode 3 onwards. We have a time skip by the time episode 4 comes along. The higher-ups have advanced their technology, and the slums are crazier than ever, especially when Silco raises Powder to be a brilliant yet crazy fighter named Jinx. Jinx is drastically different from the bright young youth she used to be. Powder used to be approachable. Now Jinx is mentally unstable from her past trauma as Powder. The show does an excellent job at not just telling you about Jinx's trauma, but showing you Jinx's trauma visually. Every time we see Jinx go through a mental breakdown, there are these rapid cuts, weird, sketchy monsters, possibly representing her inner demons. Rapid cutting. Scenes of her acting in turmoil. This didn't happen. It just didn't happen. Shut up about what happened. It's all about winning Silco's affection now. Silco. Get rid of Vi. And on it goes. Her sister Vi had been spending many years in a prison cell, and has recently been released by a new colleague from the rich higher-ups named Kate. Tensions rise between the higher and lower classes, as politicians try to manipulate and outwit each other, and mostly overlooking the conflict in the lower class, which will bite them in the end. The lower classes are desperate and can't let go of their bitter rivalries. And all these crazy events circulate and ultimately culminate at the emotional core of the show, the bond between the two sisters, Vi and Jinx, aka Powder. Will Vi and Powder be able to rekindle from their troubled past and put this turmoil behind them? Will they be able to live a lifestyle that doesn't corrupt their characters? Or is Vi unwilling to move on? Or is Jinx just too far gone? Seeing this adaptation of League of Legends at play, this show could have easily have just simply been another advertisement campaign for their respective video game. Maybe they could have done a lore anthology series and/or origin story and called it a day. And this could have easily have been a bandwagon for extremists of inclusivity to preach down our throats. But what makes this show really engaging can be summed up in one word: writing. Looking back now, I find it fascinating how you can have all the diverse cast of complex characters you want. You can have all the in-depth lore and world building you want. But if the writing isn't of good quality, all that world building will fall apart. This show has some of the most engaging writing in recent history. This show has really engaging writing. Whoever wrote this show really knows how to create characters who are deeply flawed yet have noble ambitions. The writers of the show do an excellent job at not only making us emotionally relate to these characters, but also give us characters that, despite their noble virtues, are inherently deeply flawed, no matter how good their intentions are. Due to the quality of the writing in the show, one could perceive the show as a cautionary tale on what happens if a society becomes unstable. I think the final frame of the show, in season 1 at least, really sells that idea, but I'll get into that later. Thematically speaking, the show presents us with a society that could have easily have solved all the issues if the higher-ups were more generous to the slums. Kind of like how America could have solved the poverty problem if they didn't spend so much on their gambling. Funny how art mimics real life, huh? We see the higher-ups are willing to take votes on each other, risk their lives for scientific endeavors on each other, have sex with each other. And whilst from some of those politicians' perspectives what they're doing can be quite good and personal, you can definitely sense there's also something that could potentially go wrong with what they're choosing to do. And it's not just the rich upper class that's having these problems that are causing the conflict. It's also the people in the lower class who are causing this conflict, with their petty squabbles and rivalries. Watching the show, occasionally I just thought to myself, why don't some of these characters just leave the city? I know of a safe haven I can go to if things go really bad here, so what's these characters' excuses? The show does an excellent job at establishing how most of these characters remain in the city and remain in the conflict because they're wanting power and they want to settle deals with people that they have bitter rivalries with. And because of this immense conflict between higher and lower classes and conflicts within the higher and lower classes, the show establishes that every action has its consequences. Every relationship affects other relationships. Rivalries are made, jealousies are formed. Some heroic characters like Vi have heroic tendencies, yet can be bad-tempered. More villainous characters, the more obvious being Silco and some of the other people in the higher-ups, villainous characters like Silco have their villainous tendencies, but also show a few kindles of selfless love. The writing is brilliant. I've said that before, but it really is brilliant. It makes each and every character in some way relatable, no matter what minority they put themselves in. The writers are honest enough to say that everybody of all these positions, minorities, and positions in life are all virtuous in some way, yet at the same time they are deeply flawed. Silco as a villain does tend to kill people and manipulate people for his own ends. And yet Silco himself, if I remember correctly, has never betrayed anybody, unlike the father figure that the two young sisters used to look up to. Am I correct in saying that Silco is a manipulative... Am I correct in saying that Silco is a manipulative jerk who's never betrayed anybody? And yes, Silco did raise Powder to be a mentally unstable, but does the declining of Jinx's mental health trace back to Silco raising her? Or from Vi getting angry at Jinx, aka Powder, to begin with? Of course, the show never shies away from any of the bad deeds that all these characters do. And yet even Silco, for his deliberate Blofeld look, all these tropes that are associated with the villain, like his own office with the big chair, the scientific experiments that turn people to monsters, the manipulation, the British accent... You still get a sense from the way he's written that not everything he does is for deliberately malicious intentions. Honestly, there are so many striking lines just from Silco. Like at the end of episode 1, he has this prisoner that he takes away and then showcases how the chemicals can mutate, transform this mouse into this monster that brutally slaughters this cat. And then I think there was a line that was something along the lines of, this monster's hungry. How are we going to feed him? Or how else are we going to use this energy? And then Silco says, we just had a volunteer. And I just thought to myself, oh! Oh, is he gonna feed the guy to the monster? Well, he doesn't. But just that line, we just had a volunteer. The show does an excellent job at getting people to fill in the blanks. And combine this with the excellent visual storytelling through this stylized animation makes for a really engaging show. Alright, let's get the elephant out of the room. This show looks stunning. How does the animation look? Think if Into the Spider-Verse embraced a more steampunk style, had CGI characters brutally fighting each other in front of backdrops that look like something out of concept art paintings. I find that part about the backdrops looking like concept art paintings particularly clever, because I myself love making landscape paintings. I even graduated with a degree. It's always a pleasure of mine to look at these concept art books for these animated projects and just look at how stunning these backdrops are, and how the stunning quality doesn't always get translated well into the final product, as good looking as it is. But here, the team have taken the concept art, or they've embraced some kind of style with their backdrops. They make it look like the painting scene in the backdrops, and combine it with the CGI action in front of it. I could be wrong, but that's what it looks like to me. I'm an artist, I've got a sharp eye for these things. It's a visual feast. Character animations are excellently well done, and they really know how to intensify the emotions on these characters in a way that feels visceral. And as far as I'm aware, the pacing works quite well, and ultimately culminates into this tragedy of epic proportions, which, again, I think the writing was deliberately trying to tell a story on what happens when a society becomes corrupt in the higher and lower classes. And believe me, it's so refreshing to have a show like this prioritize making a good story first and foremost above any other agenda that's usually associated with Hollywood these days. Any other subtopics are just additions to an already brilliantly written, crafted story. The point I'm trying to make here is that I've been here for almost 24 years and I know a good story when I see one. And even though the show is quite a tragedy, the show does have some of its light-hearted moments with the innocence and curiosity of children. The wonder of some things like the firelights. You would not believe your eyes if 10 million firelights lit up Arcane as I watched the show. And whilst the show does depict the eventual corruption that comes from getting too invested in inventions for the wrong reasons, the show does depict scientific inventions as a wondrous thing. Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon, and many others would agree that science... I dropped the remote. Isaac Newton and Francis Bacon would agree that scientific endeavor is a wonderful thing. Even some of the fight scenes, for as brutal as they are, some of them can have an element of fun in them. Like, there's this fight scene between Jinx and this young man named Echo. I couldn't help but smirk with them. However, all this conflict builds up to one of the best season finales I've seen in a while. All this conflict eventually builds up to one of the most epically dramatic season finale scenes that I've seen. Spoiler alert! We see throughout the show that Jinx, in her mental instability, notices that Vi has a new friend in Caitlyn and forms a jealousy. And Jinx begins to question her new father figure, Silco. She manages to capture and kidnap Silco, Caitlyn, and she manages to capture and kidnap her sister Vi, Silco, and Caitlyn, all for a tea party. A very troublesome tea party. And the drama that emanates from the scene can be compared to the finale of Batman Under the Red Hood, when Batman has to confront the Red Hood in regards to how he treats the Joker.
In this scene, Jinx forces Vi to choose if Jinx should remain as she is, or if she does indeed have hope to become Powder again. Tough decisions are made. Right off the bat, the writing in the show is absolutely genius, because it starts off with a scenario in which I honestly thought that Jinx cut off Caitlyn's head into a silver platter. I honestly thought she was going to do that. And even with the implied line, I made her a snack, only to lift the lid to reveal that it was just a little cake with the gemstone on it, and then Jinx says, don't worry, I'm not that crazy. You writers, you naughty, naughty writers. Jinx forces Vi to make a decision as to whether she wants her sister Powder back but have Caitlyn get killed off, or have Vi keep Caitlyn and Jinx remain as she is. All while Silco is watching in eagerness. To make a long story short, Jinx gets mentally unstable and unintentionally kills off Silco. But Silco and Jinx had been teaming up to craft this weapon that would dominate the higher-ups, which results in all kinds of dramatic ironies and whatnot that, even though Silco's dead, he manages to get Jinx to do what Silco wanted all the time. And what happens next showcases the consequences of what happens when the higher-ups largely ignore the lower classes. And Vi and Caitlyn are helpless to stop Jinx from launching this gemstone-powered rocket to blow up the higher-ups in their council room, which results in the slow-motion final frame of the rocket just breaking through the glass as the council members watch in shock, and a brief flash of this sort of sketchy inner demon that haunts Jinx. And the show ends there. That's a brilliant way to end that season. I've heard rumors that they're planning on making a second season, but honestly, I think that story is so powerful as a cautionary tale on what happens when society becomes corrupt. I think just that final frame just tells us everything about themes of consequences. And essentially, if the rich ignore the poor will make the rich focus on them, whether they like it or not. That always tends to be disastrous. It's exactly why there are some Africans who go out to these trading ships to invade them, because they've been mistreated badly on land, so they're going to mistreat others badly out at sea. That's the way piracy works, as depicted in the film Captain Phillips. And all the drama that centers around this main theme are all cherries on top. And the emotional core of these two sisters, I think, sells this idea on if society is willing to move on past their petty conflicts and form an objectively healthy state of mind, or continue to deprave themselves in this subjective, chaotic mess, which ultimately results in society eating itself. I think that reason and many more is why that final image for season 1 is so powerful. I think the story could be great if it just ended there. I mean, if they're going to do more story out of this, like, I don't mind. It's just that last frame was just the perfect way to end season 1. The show has an excellent sense of knowing just the right moment to produce a cliffhanger for people to come back to see what happens next. And that final image in the last episode, I think that just brilliantly summarizes all the pain, all the mess, all the evil that's been happening in the context of the story. As a side note, I've seen many people on the internet compare Jinx herself with characters like Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan and Harley Quinn from the Batman series. Now, the Harley Quinn comparison was kind of on the nose even before the series began, when Jinx was a popular fighter character in the League of Legends game. Their attitudes and their voices just sound so similar. It's particularly when Jinx does this whole crazed showman kind of voice she does when she's upping her ego. Fortunately, there are some differences. Harley Quinn went crazy over this one guy, over this one criminal man. Jinx, on the other hand, went crazy over a terrible incident which was mostly her fault, which traumatizes her even further. From that perspective, more people could compare Jinx with the Joker, because the Joker went crazy after one bad day. Or perhaps people are more willing to compare her to Jason Todd and the Red Hood, especially in the context of that final scene of forcing a certain character to make a decision and blowing stuff up. There's been a comparison between Jinx and Eren Yeager. Someone on the internet even went out of their way to risk copyright, I must admit, to make a music video combining the song by Imagine Dragons' My Enemy and My War, to show the parallels that Jinx and Eren Yeager were both raised in flawed societies. Both of them got respectively sick of it for their own reasons, and in their anger lashed back in a way that society would deeply regret. Having mentioned that, I remember this proverb. It was some kind of native proverb. I can't remember where it's sourced, but it went something like this. If someone isn't welcomed within the village, he will burn it down to feel its warmth. The proverb went something like this. If a person isn't warmly welcomed in a village, he will burn it down to feel its warmth. That kind of theme was relevant in Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, in which society kept ignoring this mentally declining man, and he lashed back at society hard in a way that they would regret. So some may see Arcane as a morally corrupt mess. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some people who looked at Arcane and just thought, there's nothing of that much moral virtue to take away from. However, stories don't just serve to teach us. Stories aren't just a means to tell us of moral virtues. They can also be used as a tool for cautionary stories. That's why so many tragedies exist. In this case, I think the show teaches a very important lesson that a lot of people, regardless of what they believe in or what they affiliate themselves with, can really relate to. Look out for one another in society, lest they lash back out at you. If you don't provide for them, they will lash back at you in some way. So how would I rate Arcane Season 1? I could change my mind on this, but I think I'm going to give Arcane a 10 out of 12. This is a really well-crafted and especially well-written show. The strongest aspect of the show, I think, is the writing, combined with the superb visual style. I wouldn't say it's perfect because the season itself doesn't fully wrap up certain characters that were introduced. I felt like the final episode could have at least had a few moments wrapping up the arcs of Echo and Heimeldinger. I think that was his name. Or something else to do with the mural that was made in dedication to the young gang. Maybe something as simple as a reaction shot from Echo and Heimeldinger noticing the rocket launched by Jinx. I think even that probably would have done it for me. Because thematically, that would just see how Echo sees just how far gone his former crush has gone to. And Heimeldinger could watch in shock as the society he used to stand up for is getting destroyed. I think something like that, just a little addition like that, I think that would have wrapped it up great for me. I think the show could have used a few more character revelations like that, but other than that, I think the show is really well crafted as it is. So, if you care for well-crafted stories like I do, feel free to subscribe to this channel. Feel free to hit the notification bell if you want to know when and where more videos are being uploaded. If you want to know when more videos are being uploaded. In the meantime, ScotsMaiar signing out. By the way, play My Enemy during the gym. You can thank me later.